Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry, to Gar-Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
Not in the playoffs last year to an NBA Finals.
Not in the playoffs the last 10 years. That's never happened before. A team making the finals after missing the playoffs for 10 years or more. Paul putting on the finishing touches. What a performance from Chris Paul. 41 points. He has waited his entire career to make the finals.
Another for Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Rushed by George defensively. Booker waiting with it. He's way out on the perimeter now. Booker lobs it for Ayton. Ayton looks, goes over to Rubio. Rubio on the drive. Waits, shoots. The shot is not good. Rebound Zubats. He loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time. 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Booker on the drive. Goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot! He got it! Woo! And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the Western Conference champion Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined, as always, by my whistling co-host and friend. His name is David Nash. David, how you feeling, man?
I'm a little tired, like we were just discussing, but adrenaline is a hell of a drug here, Max, and we are back, not only on the pod, but all the way to the NBA Finals, and I am still pinching myself. Woke up this morning wondering if it was all a bit of a dream, but we both predicted it. Suns in 6, Max.
We did. We got that one right. It's funny you say we're back, obviously the podcast, but as the Suns back to the finals. Like, for us, we're about the exact same age. Like, this is really kind of the first time we've been in the finals in our kind of our waking lives. You know, like, we were 5 years old when they were there the last time.
Yep.
So it's kind of uncharted territory, and man, does it feel good.
It really is. It really is. I mean, a lot of people have asked me how I became a Suns fan over here on the other side of the world in Australia. I think we even discussed it a couple of times on some of those pods where we were scratching around for ideas when the team was definitely not this good, Max. And, you know, I became a fan on the back of the last finals run, really. I was 6 years old. I had some old VHS tapes because that's how we got basketball down here, at least consistently in Australia, I should say. And, you know, it was watching back some of those as I was, you know, getting to 8, 9, 10 years of age when I was really starting to play competitive basketball. So Charles Barkley was my first Suns love, and as we'll get onto in this pod, I've got some new Suns loves here, including one who has only played a season but just had a hell of a last game to finish that one off, Max.
I have no idea who you're talking about. Similar, man. Like, my first memory, not even of basketball or sports, of my life is remembering my dad betting his buddy on the 93 finals. Like, I remember thinking, like, wait, you bet $500 on a basketball series? And being so confused by it as a little kid, but I get it now. I would do something similar now. I think we grow into our parents sometimes. But I don't know, Dave, what do you want to talk about, you know, on this podcast? You seen any good movies lately, or?
I haven't been able to go to the movies. My movies have been sitting down and watching live Suns games and re-watching lots of Suns games as well. It has been my entire life for quite a while now, Max. I got a little personal on Twitter the other day. It's really got me through some pretty tough lockdowns and other events here in Australia, as I'm sure it has with a lot of people listening all around the world. So I'm ready to talk about the Suns. I know you were joking there, Max, but I am very much ready to talk once again about this remarkable run that we are on.
Me too. Let's talk about those Suns. So this episode, we're going to do a full episode. Like, I mean, listeners of the last one that we broke it up into two.
Yeah.
We're just going to, you know, the Suns deserve 2 full podcasts from us, so we're going to do 2 full ones. This one's going to be all about the Clippers series, and we might bleed into just the Western Conference playoffs in entirety.
Yep.
And then the next one we'll do whenever we find out who we're going to play against. It's not going to be tonight. We might find out Saturday night, Arizona time. We might find out Monday night. But whichever night we find out, that's when we'll record our preview podcast for the NBA Finals, which the Suns are playing in, David.
Oh, man. I can't believe it.
But before we start on any of that, we're going to do, obviously this episode, we're going to do the 5 stars. We're talking about all that stuff. But David, before we get there, how about a recap?
Max, our Phoenix Suns are on their way to the NBA Finals after defeating the LA Clippers 4-2 in the Western Conference Finals and raising another banner in the rafters for that achievement. Game 1 feels like an eternity ago now. They won 120-114. Book had 40, 13, and 11. Ayton had 20 and 9. McHale had 14. Crowder 13. And Cam Johnson had 12. Game 2, they went up 2-zip, 104-103. Cam Payne filled in remarkably with 29 and 9. Ayton had 24 and 14. Book had 24 and 5. Saric popped up with 11. And Cam Johnson again at the end of the stat sheet there with 11 points of his own. Game 3, not so good. 92-106, the first defeat of the series. Ayton again, 18 and 9. McHale 13, Cam Johnson 12. Book and Paul in that one combined for 30 points on just 10 of 40 shooting, and the world was starting to fall down around us as Suns fans, Max. But Game 4, they bounced back 84-80, an absolute rock fight as I called it. Ayton once again had his best game of his career, at least in my mind, with 19, 22, 3, 1, and 4 blocks. Booker had 25, Paul had 18 and 7. Game 5, back down to earth again, a 102-116 defeat. Book had 31, 4, 3, and 2. Paul had 22 and 8. Cam Johnson had 14 off the bench, and Ayton just 10 and 11, but another double-double, but it was not enough. And then we rounded out Game 6, blew the doors off of Max, 130-103. Chris Paul, 41 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, and 3 steals. Devin Booker, 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. DeAndre Ayton, 16 points, 17 rebounds, and 2 blocks. And Jay Crowder popped up for the first time in the recap with 19 points of his own. This is where we normally talk about health. We might be going to the NBA Finals with a clean bill of health, Max. We had Cam Johnson miss Game 6 with a non-COVID illness. Abdul Nader came back from the knee injury and is off the injury report, maybe much to the regret of many Suns fans, which we may get into at some stage, Max. Chris Paul had COVID for the first 2 games, you might remember. Again, feels like an eternity ago, and just popped up, put himself on the injury report, I suppose, with his post-game comments that he had an MRI on his wrist, so that's going to be something to watch going forward. And of course, Devin Booker broke his nose in 3 places, but didn't miss any time on the court. The Eastern Conference Finals are the other bit of news. We await our opponent, Max, tied 2-2. Currently, Game 5 is going on, and I believe the Bucks have that one under control, so by the time everyone listens to this, they might be 1 win closer to joining us in the finals. And we don't have a final schedule set, at least just yet, Max, and that is frustrating for you and I, at least, who are trying to work out when we're going to come back and pod next. But I always throw this question to you without notice. It should be with notice by now. You should be expecting it. Before we get into it all, what will define this series for you, Max? A play, a moment, a player? What have you got for me?
Yeah, you could have given me infinite notice. It would be hard for me to figure this one out. I think recency bias makes me want to pick a Game 6 moment, but I think it's going to be the same for everybody when we actually look back on all this. It's probably going to be the Valley-Oop. Mm-hmm. It's hard for it not to be. That was just such a crazy play. But, I mean, the other contender, obviously, is what Chris Paul did at the end of Game 6. It was just an insane second half, just a quintessential Chris Paul game on so many levels. It's hard for it not to be that.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that. We'll get into a few things as we discuss. It was pretty much a team effort. Lots of folks popped up in this series, and therefore you wouldn't be wrong by picking one of probably a whole host of different moments that could define this series for different fans out there, Max. So I'm just excited to get stuck into it and start talking about these things, because it was a hell of a series, if not the prettiest basketball played, at least the whole time, Max.
Yeah, that was how I was going to lead into 5 stars, actually, is, going through this, when we prepare for 5 stars, we both, kind of dig into the stats a little bit more than we do when you're just watching the games.
Yep.
And man, oh man, a few guys accepted. It was not not a pretty series statistically in terms of series averages, David, like at all.
No.
It's also a series where a lot of people miss time, weirdly. There were obviously, you went through the injuries. For a team that squeaked by the playoffs because everybody else was injured, we sure had a lot of injuries. I gotta say. But all right, let's go ahead and start with 5 stars. David, last night I emotionally was ready to kill anybody who wouldn't give 5 stars to Chris Paul. But I've since thought better of it, in my opinion. I think my brain has prevailed over my heart, and I've given my 5 stars to the player who is the most consistent in the entire series. Had only one bad game in my estimation. Closed out great, started great, fantastic. It was DeAndre Ayton for me, David.
I'm glad that we agree on this one, Max. He got my 5 stars as well. And I'm sure everyone listening will be close to giving him 5. But, we're going to find out. As you mentioned, guys miss games here. People tend to look at this through a different lens and value different things. Whereas, just being there and playing the full series, and as you said, only having one bad game was enough for me. He stood up in a big way, and this was the series that I was worried about. I remember talking about it on one of the last pods, saying he'd kind of got a dream run to start with what he generally needs, like a job on a specific guy that suits his skill set, and there was no real job waiting for him, yet he still popped out here with 17.8 points per game on 69.3% shooting, had 13.7 rebounds per game, 4.5 of those were offensive boards, which I think was a series high for him, and 1.7 blocks as well, which was more than normal, and they had him running around everywhere and trying to get back to defend the rim. But I had my case written out for Ayton in case you went another way here, Max, but you didn't. You've thrown me a curveball here. But game 1, I thought he was the second best player on the court, obviously behind Devin Booker. Game 2, I broke down in the newsletter. The Valley-oop obviously topped it off, but I thought that was his best game of his career, at least to that date, when he had it. Game 3, they lost, but he was the best player on the court. Game 4 then became his new best game ever, and remains his best game ever, I think. Game 5 was the dud that we both referenced there. And then Game 6, obviously Chris Paul, best player on the court. Definitely can argue that Devin Booker was the next best, but he's got a real argument to being the second or third best player on the court. And some stats that I mentioned last time, Max, 23 screen assists in Game 6 and 21 contested shots, and I think 10 of those contested shots were shots from deep. So that was kind of a little microcosm of what he was asked to do this entire series, and by God, he was impressive, Max.
Yeah, and you know what? You say Game 4 was the best game he's ever played, and I think there's a great argument for that, but I would also give an argument for Game 6, honestly.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because Game 5, as we both just said 3 times, was not his best game. It was his worst game, maybe of the playoffs, certainly of the series.
I think so.
And it was because I think largely, you made a good point earlier that he didn't have the matchup in this series, but he kind of got it a little bit with Zubac.
Yep.
In at least games 2 through 4, and that went away in Game 5, and he looked confused. And I think that's fair. I mean, it was took him by surprise. I think the Suns, all the Suns were taken by surprise in that game. Hopefully, we won't talk too much about that game because it was miserable. But I think Monty got kind of killed in that game too. A lot of people got killed in that game. But the way he responded in Game 6 with very little changes from the Clippers, right? They kind of did the same thing to him.
Yep.
It was just totally different. And part of that, obviously, was the team doing a better job getting him involved. But a lot of it's him. So some of the way he was, particularly in the first quarter, some of the shots he was making around the rim,
Yep.
he was just giving a lot of confidence that, hey, DeAndre Ayton's going to be able to hang in this game. And then my other favorite part about his Game 6 was Monty leaving him in the game like the entire second half until garbage time, basically. Didn't bring Sarge back in, which we'll get to Monty a little later, I think. Thought his Game 6 was spectacular, especially bouncing back from Game 5.
Agreed.
But the fact that Ayton was even able to do that, it's just amazing, man. It really is. I mean, everyone has to remember, this guy is 22 years old and never played like this in his life before the playoffs. He had flashes of playing like this at the regular season. He had stretches of it.
Yep.
Never this consistently. And never this good, honestly. We both just said that, we're arguing with the 2 best games of his career, what just happened in this series. It's just, and we're not even talking about the one where he made the game winner. It's unbelievable. And anybody, and I swear I'm not going to do this very much because it annoys me that we focus on the haters so much.
Yep.
But man, if you want to blame all the injuries and stuff, how about blaming the fact that that the best player in the Western Conference Finals throughout consistently has been 22 years old and you couldn't take advantage of that? That's pretty freaking amazing, man. And you really just can't give enough credit to this guy. It defies words, David.
It really does, and I've this is going to come up a lot through the pod. I've been watching a lot of the post-game interviews. I think I even touched on it last time that we recorded. It's just, my little insight. I don't get to be around the team or go to games and see things that the cameras don't show. So I try and, pick up as much as I can from little droplets from everyone. And I think it was after that game 4, he referenced the fact that everyone wrote him off, that he was going to sit in the playoffs. That was kind of the scouting report on him when he was a rookie or a draft prospect. And, he really took that to heart and channeled it the right way and wanted to prove everyone wrong, which is just, great character. We've always talked about it with DeAndre. He has amazing character. And this is becoming a bit of a hallmark of his very young career, is when he has a bad game, as much as you don't want him to and you just want him to be a consistent guy throughout, that's pretty hard in a 82 game and 20 odd a playoff game series if you make it all the way to the finals. He's going to have duds, but the fact that he bounces back, it's just such a showing of his character. And I think it shows an old and a new thing. I think the old thing is that he doesn't, what was perceived even by myself as his lackadaisical approach towards things was maybe a bit of a negative, but he's able to just wipe those games off and start again. And then the new thing, which he touches on and tells on himself very much, is that he didn't used to like film, and now he loves it. He says he watches it like movies. A little callback to the start of the episode here, Max. These are his movies, just like we discussed. He loves watching the tape, and you can see it because he's getting put in those same positions in Game 6 that he was in Game 5, yet he knew how to punish it this time because he'd watched the film. And it's just so impressive to see this from a 22-year-old. I said it at the time, he very much deserved that game winner. The fact that the Valley-oop might be the defining moment of this series and maybe the entire playoffs for the Suns, he deserves that. He deserves every bit of credit that he's getting right now. And he stood up to the challenge, which, I just can't be happier for him, to be perfectly honest, because he's such a lovable guy to have on your team, Max.
Did you read his Players Tribune article that came out a couple weeks ago?
I sure did.
It's if you haven't read it, listeners, read it. It's unbelievably good. Like, it hits every single note down to the T. And I think you made a great point there, David. It's almost like DeAndre Ayton's still a kid, but he's now a kid who's fallen in love with basketball.
Yep.
It's like his hobby now. And before he just did it because he was good at it. Now he loves it, and we're seeing the dividends of that. It's great. We always used to say, like, what if you could put Kevin Garnett in DeAndre Ayton's body, or X and Y in DeAndre Ayton's body, right?
Yep.
And I mean, we partially got some Chris Paul in DeAndre Ayton's head here a little bit, but it's really just DeAndre Ayton in DeAndre Ayton's head. DeAndre Ayton has clicked. He cares about basketball now, and it's just so obvious. And now that he has that going for him, and his joyous personality, the way he answers questions to the media, how lovable he is, it's just so much better when it's backed up by the fact that he's also caring about the game and playing hard, and like you said, watching film. He's my favorite Suns player to watch get interviewed now by far. Oh, it's not even close. Yeah. And it used to be the exact opposite, right?
100%. And you touched on it before, like how out of nowhere this seems to be. He, in a few of his recent interviews, has talked about, before these finals games, it was like the Pac-12 tournament was as big as it got for him. And, this is very, very different to that. And that's just, brutal honesty from him. But it's so insightful for us fans, particularly someone like myself on the other side of the world who's trying to learn about these guys through those interviews. He's easily the best interview, probably right behind Chris Paul, which we'll touch on a bit later. I'm just loving watching his kind of look back on his career as he gets one step closer to the ultimate goal that he's always been searching for. And his honesty has been great to hear as well. But, Chris Paul, great kind of reference there. I think you said it, he deserves all the credit. You can talk about Chris Paul, James Jones, Monty Williams setting up DeAndre Ayton with a structure around him to help him through this, first part of his career and get to be the best player that he can possibly be. But none of those people deserve the credit like DeAndre does, because he's the one that's done the work and applied himself and just brought, a playoffs that literally no one could have expected, I don't think. Even the most pro DeAndre Ayton people out there that believed that he was going to be Hakeem Olajuwon, I don't think can honestly say this is what they expected after the regular season that he was going to do consistently in the playoffs, Max.
No, it would have been irrational to expect it. It was beyond any expectation, right? I mean, I remember you and I having this conversation when we were talking about before the Lakers series. We were talking about like realistic ceilings, right? And we were talking about Ayton can't be the most important player in the playoffs because his realistic ceiling is just not that high, and he shattered it, didn't he? He just absolutely shattered it. And I think that's, I mean, I actually want to make a weird comparison to my philosophy on parenting, which is that you can screw up a kid really badly as a parent, but you can only do so much to like get a kid somewhere. Like a lot of that's genetics.
Yep.
And I think that's the case here with Ayton too. Like we've seen organizations screw up players before. That is definitely something that Suns fans have experience with.
Yep.
And they may have been on that direction right after drafting him when Mr. gets all the acclaim for some reason was still GM. But this organization got itself together and created the perfect nurturing atmosphere for Ayton. But at that point, that's all they needed to do. They weren't screwing up anymore, and it was on Ayton from then on to grab it by the horns, and he absolutely did. It's beautiful to see. Every Suns fan should be beyond proud of him. One thing I want to get onto on him, David.
Yep.
I'm sure you listen to the Timeline guys.
Always.
Recap of the game.
Yep.
I love the point that they made. I just want to hammer it here too some more because I just love it so much. It was on the Ayton in this playoff run has like by far the best field goal percentage of all time.
Yep.
It's not even close in the playoffs.
Yep.
And the point that I can't remember if it was Sam or Mike, and it kind of both of them made this point, but basically it was like, listen, you could say it's easy because he's like making easy shots or whatever, and he's a finisher and that's it. But like, why hasn't anybody else done it then? Like, if it's so easy,
exactly.
Why is he so far ahead of the rest of the pack? And guess what? If you're actually watching DeAndre Ayton play basketball in these games, he's not dunking everything. I mean, he's dunking a lot more than he used to, which is great. But a lot of these are difficult touch finishes around the rim that he's making at a very high rate consistently. You and I have been talking about that in the basketball podcast about how he's such a great dump-off option now, like late in the clock when you don't know what else to do.
Yep.
But he exceeded that, I think, in Game 6 of the first quarter when they were looking to him. He was their offensive plan early on, and he rose to the occasion with some of those great little touch hook shots that he has. I mean, you can't not give him credit for what he's doing finishing. He has an ability, his touch, that is unparalleled in the current NBA, I would say.
His touch in the paint overall, there's not a shot that I will dislike him taking if he's got 1 foot in the paint because his touch from those areas is just insane. And, we talked about him being that bailout option. I think there's a really interesting, chicken or egg discussion to have about DeAndre Ayton and this run in the playoffs that he's had. I think we've seen Book and Paul in particular trust him more as each game has gone on, and him pay that trust back by having incredibly solid hands on the catch outside of that game 5 where it seemed to be back to dropping a lot of passes and things, and then finishing off plays with that elite touch. And it's kind of that chicken and egg scenario where it's like, what comes first? You've got to give him the confidence to use those elite skills and kind of really instill that confidence in him by giving it to him. No one wants to be the guy that sees that open pass and they don't make it to you because, they don't trust you essentially. So I think that has been the most fascinating part of this run for DeAndre, is trying to work out, whether it was him lifting a level and then everyone kind of going with him a little bit more, or whether a conversation happened where there was a heart-to-heart of like, guys, you've got to trust me more and I'll pay you back. There was a great quote again from one of his post-game press conferences, or Chris Paul's, I think it might have been, where he was saying in the pre-game walkthrough, he was saying to everyone, guys, trust me on the defensive end. This paint's mine. I don't need your help. Like, stay with your guys. And that was, the best defensive showing that the Suns had in the series. So, yeah, I'm fascinated by that discussion more than anything. I'm fascinated by one more thing that I'll throw at you, Max, and that is we've seen all these little flashes from Ayton in this series, and I'm wondering, this version of Ayton now, what's your favorite Ayton thing? Like, if you had to pick one thing about him right now and what he does on the court, what would your favorite be? It's
such a good question. So I think the best thing that he does is defend without fouling, and his versatility to be able to defend against kind of any team defense, right, or any team's offense right now. It's probably the best thing about him.
Yep.
But my favorite thing about him, just personally, is how he finishes every single lob ever. How, the lob will be like way too high, and he'll just like grab it with one hand and just like effortlessly just throw it in the basket in a way that no other player can do, but he just does. Like, it makes it look like the easiest thing in the world to do. I think that's my favorite thing he does. How about you?
Mine, it's not a new thing, to be honest. It's probably the oldest thing. It's the O boards. 4.5 in this series.
Oh, yeah.
They're soul crushers. There's getting offensive boards, and then there's the boards that DeAndre Ayton gets. Like, I track them every game, and the amount of times that they end in threes to Jay Crowder or Devin Booker or Chris Paul is phenomenal. Or fouls in the case of Game 6, where it was just ending in 3-pointers made or fouls, which got them early into the bonus. And the really key difference between Game 5 and Game 6, I thought, Max, was I think they made an adjustment where on those offensive boards, all 5 guys were crashing the paint and just touching Ayton, like, digging at him when he kind of bobbled quite a few and lost the possession of those offensive rebounds. And then in Game 6, he was just stronger, met the ball right at the tip and kept it high so they couldn't attack him on those offensive boards. And that's what opens up the threes, because all of a sudden everyone on the outside is wide open. And if they're not, there's someone fouling him because they've hit him in the face or something. So I just thought that, that would be my favorite thing of his overall, and was definitely my favorite thing from Game 6, because it just crushes the other team, Max.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's so important. Like, his rebounds, they all matter. Those are all impact. And I think that we may have lost Game 4 if not for him in that last minute getting those old rebounds.
Definitely.
You remember what I'm talking about? I mean, he had a couple huge ones. He's just
100%.
Because he just jumps so freaking high, and he's so long, and he's so good. Like,
yep.
It almost looks like when he's doing it that it's like a problem that he's bouncing it up in the air, but it's helping. He's the one getting there, and he's the one directing it, and he can often wind up cradling on himself. I kind of want to steal your answer, David. I agree with you. It's a better answer than mine.
All right.
All right, David. Let's go to 4-star. We may have some disagreements later on this, but I don't think we're going to disagree here, are we?
We might.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
I don't know.
Who do you got for 4-star?
I got Devin Booker, 4 stars.
All right. We do disagree. I mean, he's my 3-star, and I'm sure my guy is your 3-star. So why don't you give me Devin Booker then?
We do rotate a couple of times, but it's probably a good thing. We are on a very lengthy pace here after gushing about DeAndre Ayton for about 20 minutes, which is not a sentence I thought I would have said about a month ago, Max. So Devin Booker, 25.5 points per game, rather inefficient, 38, 29, and 91 from the free throw line, 5.8 rebounds, 4.7 assists, but 7.2 free throw attempts in this series, and 41.4 minutes per game. I'm going to throw a quick question your way to start us off. How many minutes is Booker averaging in the playoffs and making at least my pre-playoffs prediction look absolutely ridiculous, Max?
Well, he had a lot in the Lakers series, a lot in this series, obviously. I imagine Denver was a little lower, but I'm still going to guess he's at 40.
He is at 40.4 minutes for the entire playoffs so far. And I wanted to talk about 2 things in particular with Devin, 2 things that we discussed on many 7 seconds or less podcasts in the past, Max. And before we get into this series in particular, how ridiculous are the injury-prone discussions about Devin Booker now, Max, after he is just pushing through this series?
Remember that podcast we did so long ago with Kellen when I laid out the young guard injury thing and how Booker was right in the middle?
I sure do.
Yeah, but it was never really a problem. It was really small sample size stuff, and he had a couple really kind of like annoying injuries where he got hurt on soft tissue in like bad ways.
Yep.
But it's never been a really problem. And he's definitely grown into what he called so long ago his man body. He has that now very clearly. And it's been great. His durability has been really great. I mean, also his will to play through this broken nose thing, which, guys, it's not fun. It isn't fun. Especially, I'm sure you saw the Rip Hamilton thing, where Rip Hamilton's like, yeah, they had to put me under for what happened to Devin Booker. That guy just got a little bit of Novocaine or whatever the fuck it was.
I couldn't believe that quote. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable, man. He's an obsessive competitor. This guy is in the same vein as a guy like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, where all he cares about is winning. He's not worried about his personal safety. I loved his comment about taking the mask off. Like, if I get punched in the nose again, I'll just get surgery in the offseason.
Yeah.
This guy doesn't care. He has one mission. How much do you think that guy thinks about all the crap that was said about him being a losing player and a losing team and all that. Like that, I can't imagine what kind of motivation that is for him. I'm sure that's what's driving this, right?
He's mentioned it a few times. You know, he's literally said, I've put up with a lot of bullshit. And I think he's talking internally about the basket case that the Suns were early on, but also a lot of the external conversation, which he never reacted to or even noted at the time. But now that he's, you know, got this time in the sun, no pun intended there, I think he's reacting a little bit and kind of saying, I told you so. And you said it, he's one-track mind at the moment. He's got that Be Legendary tattoo on his wrist from Kobe Bryant. And the broken nose that you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned it. It feels like an eternity ago. We got a reminder almost every game with that mask that he was wearing, or when he took it off and copped another elbow from Paul George to the broken nose. But, you know, that has a chance to be remembered forever. You know, there's some pretty incredible Suns moments, you know, between Steve Nash's hip check, his broken nose, the one closed eye. Those ones we remember forever, but they kind of have a bit of a bitter taste to them in the end. This one has a chance to be remembered forever for all the right reasons, Max. And it speaks to his toughness. And it speaks to the type of guy that he is, where he has just got that one-track mind at the moment. And, you know, game one feels like forever ago, but got to mention it. I think we potted after it, so we talked about it a fair bit already. But first triple-double, 40, 13, and 11. And you were the one who talked about game scores a little while ago on a pod. 34.5 was the game score in that one, which is only second to the other game that he had where you've last referenced game scores and how ridiculous some of these Booker games are in the pantheon of Suns playoff games, Max.
I hope you didn't look too closely at game scores. That's my quiz for you later.
I just sorted and looked at the top, so I think you're safe.
All right, good. No, but yeah, that game, you said 40, 13, 11, 15 to 29 shooting, 3 of 7 from 3, 7 of 7 free throws, only 2 turnovers in 44 minutes.
Whew.
That game, so here's the thing about that game. Chris Paul, the COVID situation, that could have been so demoralizing because remember, the Nuggets series, Chris Paul finished that series similarly the way he finished this series with an all-time classic closeout game in Denver.
Yep.
And to have him go out that way, and, you know, they didn't know when he was coming back. I'm sure internally they knew it wasn't going to be too long.
Yeah.
But, you know, 2 games in a series like this could be the difference. And the fact that Devin Booker came out like that and just totally controlled the entire game, it was the best player on the court by far. It just, how much confidence must that inspired in his team that, hey, guys, Chris might not be here, but we can still win this because Devin friggin' Booker is here, and he's a star.
That's what superstars do. You know, over the course of a season and a playoffs, you know, we've seen it in the NBA now. You kind of need 2 superstars because they need to lean on one another and not make defense too easy for the opposition.
Yep.
But, you know, sitting 1 game out, 2 games out, for Devin to stand up and recognize the moment that his team needed him, like they did in the closeout game of the Lakers, and then like Chris has done in a couple of closeout games. You know, they're kind of tossing the ball back and forth between the two of them here, which is probably a great sign for them going forward into the NBA Finals here, Max. Still can't believe that I'm saying sentences like that right now. But, you know, it very, very impressive from him. And you mentioned it there. 2 games can make a series. It sure has made a series in Chris Paul's history where he's missed 2 games at the wrong time and lost a series that his team probably should have won. So, I think that's a great point. And I think, you know, bookended at the other end, his stats in Game 6, 22, 7, and 4, not amazing. He was bad from 3, still shot 50% from 2. And I think he just kind of showed that he'd worked it out. They pushed the pace a little bit more. He got to his spots. And Devin just always seems to work it out. You know, every step that they go up here, maybe it's taking him a little bit longer because the, you know, degree of difficulty also picks up a little bit. But I just love his basketball IQ. He just seems to work out what defenses are doing with him and eventually get to his spots and knock down shots, Max.
Yeah, I called his Game 6 the best 10 of 26 game I've ever seen somebody play. The 2 dunks were just, the second dunk in particular at the end of the 3rd quarter was maybe the knockout blow of the series of the game looking back at it.
For sure, yep.
It was unbelievable. And he was just attacking, right? He was getting to the rim. He had a couple misses at the rim. A couple probably should have been fouled. Maybe we'll get that a little bit later. But he was kind of the motor for that game. I don't know if you saw his brother on Twitter had tweeted. Of course, he tweeted on Twitter, but he had gone into the locker room or whatever before the game, and Devin just like looks at him and is like, "We're winning this game, and it's not going to be close." That dude had so much confidence that they were going to go win that game, and you could see it in his eyes. He was so determined. Maybe my favorite moment from him in the whole game, the poise he showed in this moment, was when Jackass Beverly shoved Paul to the ground.
Yep.
And Booker was standing right there, right next to Patrick Beverly, and didn't even flinch. Just walked over to Paul to help him up. Didn't even go towards Beverly, because he knows he has 5 technical fouls, and he can't afford to get any more going into the finals. He wasn't going to fall into any of that BS. He was there for one reason and one reason only, to win that damn game. And he was a large reason why they won that game, despite the inefficiency, David.
That is a great segue, or beat me to the punch on a question, because I was going to ask you about his tech situation, just so the listeners are aware of that situation, because I know that you've been all over it. So he does have 5 techs, as you mentioned, and 7 is where you get an automatic 1-game suspension in the playoffs. So instead of talking about that, because you've already covered it, I'm just going to give Frank Kaminsky the only reference that he will get on this podcast, and it's that he should have done more in that scenario. There was guys like Crowder and Booker who couldn't do more because they couldn't afford, and they'd obviously talked about it in the pregame to not react to the Clippers. But man, at this pointy end, those guys like 12 through 15 on the bench, like you really only have 2 jobs. That's to like wave a towel and, get in a situation like that. And stick up for your teammates, because that was just a punk move by Beverly. And I kind of wish, even though it was still sweet to see Chris Paul get up and have the last laugh there, I really wish that someone might have shoved him back a little bit, Max. But, maybe that's the fan in me, and they followed Monty's instructions instead.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it seems very clear to me that team was under strict orders to not let anything get to them.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Because especially I might bring this up a little bit later, but the refereeing at the beginning of the third quarter had the potential to get inside some people's heads. It got in my head, that's for damn sure. But it didn't get the team's head. It seems very clear to me that they were all strictly not going to react emotionally to anything that happened in that game. That seemed like that was the mantra, and they stuck to it perfectly, and I loved every second of it, David. It was amazing. I have a stat for you, David. Ready for this?
Please.
I think this is very instructive for how impactful and good Booker was, despite the fact that he was not efficient. He was the only full-time starter in the entire series with a positive net rating.
I saw that. I didn't have it written down, but I did see that because I thought it was very notable. And to be perfectly honest, it's kind of what pushed the scales in the end of me giving him 4 stars here over some of the other options, because, I thought that was notable over a 6-game series. And I think you noted it there with some of the dunks and getting into the creases, and I kind of wondered during the end of Game 6 how much more he might have even been able to do that without the broken nose and getting worried about getting whacked, particularly when foul calls weren't coming his way. So that's probably a great segue into the last point that I wanted to make of those two. I mentioned the injury-prone discussion. The other discussion we would have hypothetical long podcast discussions about was Devin Booker's defense, Max. And I think once again, even though he struggled maybe in some off-ball scenarios, I thought his on-ball defense on Paul George when he got switched onto him, Reggie Jackson, Patrick Beverly, I think he was solid. And that's really all you can ask for from a guy like Devin Booker.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even in Game 5, which, by the way, he may have been the best son in Game 5 besides Cam Johnson, he was getting switched onto, or not even switched onto, he was guarding Marcus Morris a lot. And Marcus Morris was drilling those shots. I don't really think that was his fault. Marcus Morris was just making every single turnaround jumper.
Yeah.
Right? And they made the switch, the adjustment on that early, which was great in Game 6. But I agree with you totally. I think Booker was great defensively, as he has been for the whole playoffs. I was looking at the defensive field goal against numbers today for the whole playoffs for everybody in the league today. And obviously Aiton's number 1, but Booker was like 9 or something like that. Like he was way up there. And I don't think it's totally an accident. Sometimes when things are accidents, I don't think this was. I think he's been awesome defensively the entire playoffs, and I can't say enough good about him. I hope for his sake he gets to have a more fun offensive series in the finals than he got to have in this series. This is a lot of hard work for him.
Yeah.
But I think all fans appreciate the hard work that he put in.
Agreed. Let's get to your 4-star player, Max.
Okay, I'm assuming that we have the same guy here. Is your guy Chris Paul?
It is.
Okay, so Chris Paul's stats for the series, not so good. 24 points a game on 42-38, 52% true shooting. Not great.
No.
3.3 rebounds, 8.8 assists to 2 turnovers. That's pretty good. 1.8 steals. That's good. 90% from the line on 4.8 tips. That's also good. But what really buoyed that, David, because he came back with 3 pretty bad games, was his legendary Game 6, in which he had 41 points, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, 16 of 24 shooting, 7 of 8 from 3, and 14 of our 16 points in a row in probably the key stretch of the entire game when the Clippers were trying to make a run on us. And, you know, if it's not the Booker dunk, maybe the most important play of that game was when they were only up, I think it was 7 points, and Beverly screwed up the zone defense, and Chris Paul just nailed that three-pointer. That was really a relief and kind of encapsulated how much Chris Paul saved our asses in that game.
He saved our asses big time. I'm going to stop the podcast for one quick second. We've hit one of those words where you and I pronounce it very, very differently. So let me just translate for the Australian listeners, guys. Buoyed is buoyed for us. So we'll just clear that up for both sides of the world.
It's good to get that in there. I know we have a lot of Australian listeners, so that's good.
But yeah, you're right. He was, you know, everything that he did deserved 4 or 3 stars just from Game 6 alone. You know, I probably marked him down for only playing 4 games in the series and being pretty bad in a couple of them. But, you know, Game 6 was an all-timer. And you talked about, you know, pulling it out exactly when they needed him to. In quarter 4 of the playoffs as a whole, he's 6.9 points per game, 2.1 assists, basically no turnovers, 0.1, 53% from the field, 50% from 3, and 94% from the free throw line. And in the 2 closeout games that he's been big in, Denver and now the Clippers combined, he's had 78 points on 30 of 43 shooting. That's 69%, 15 assists, 5 steals, and just 2 turnovers. When we have needed him, just like we talked about, when Devin Booker hasn't been able to step up and they needed the other superstar to, he's answered the call, Max. And, you know, what a trade. What a move. It's really, I know there's been a lot of narrative discussion about, you know, where Phoenix might have been without Chris Paul and not giving him too much credit, but they simply aren't on the doorstep of their first ever championship without Chris Paul, Max.
Remember you and I talking about, I think it was before the season started. In fact, I know it was before the season started, and we were talking about how this is like a perfect Chris Paul team because he finally gets like take the reins of like a young team with a bunch of fun players and just be the leader. And even we talk about that and how high we were on this could not have expected it to go this well. Like this could not have gone better. It is literally a perfect fit on a basketball level, on a personality level, on an everything level. It's just Chris Paul is a godsend for this freaking franchise, David. I can't believe how happy I am to call him a Phoenix Sun. And you know, we talked about in the Lakers series how that was the moment Phoenix Suns Chris Paul became like a real Phoenix Sun, right?
Yep.
I think Game 6 last night was the moment he became a Phoenix Sun legend.
I agree, and I had that note written down. We've hit, you know, the same thing again like we tend to do. I just had written down he is smashing all the narratives about him and the postseason to smithereens in this playoff run by the Suns, and the fact that he's doing it on the Suns and they're also smashing a whole bunch of narratives as a collective, and then players like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, like it just seems the kind of parallels between those two things running side by side together. I'm just, you know, I've got a smile on my face and that's why I'm struggling to get my words out here. It just kind of seems perfect in the moment. And, you know, speaking of narratives and things that have bugged him, it's not like the old narratives aren't still there. You know, he had a shoulder in Series 1, got COVID between Series 2 and 3, and then drops in one of those post-game interviews that I've been loving that he had an MRI on his wrist that might have been a big reason why he was shooting so poorly in the last couple of games. But take me into your mindset between Game 5 and 6. I found the discussion on Twitter fascinating. I had, you know, complete faith, maybe blind faith in Chris Paul, or, you know, it's a lot easier to say now seeing what he did in Game 6, but, you know, I just felt, you know, you've got to ride with you guys, but I saw a lot of discussion about, you know, going away from him all the way through to, you know, crazy takes like, you know, not having him start. How are you feeling between those two games? You know, what was your faith in Chris Paul like at that moment?
Well, I certainly wasn't about to bench him. I love Suns fans. We are tortured, cursed fans and all that stuff. So I'm not going to blame anybody for their takes. Get a little wild. But, I mean, you got to just trust the body at work on this stuff, man. And what Chris Paul did for us in the Denver series and late in the LA series too, honestly, in the first LA series, and all season long, like that's just too much for me to go off of him. I definitely thought he needed to make some adjustments to how he was playing. He was clearly dribbling the ball, the air out of the ball in Game 5, not pushing the ball enough, and those adjustments were made. And this is the thing about Chris Paul. People think he has to play Chris Paul ball the whole time, and he's shown this season with this team that he doesn't have to play Chris Paul ball all the time. He can adjust, and I thought, particularly in the first half of Game 6, especially the first quarter when they first came out, they were pushing the ball down the court, and he was a big part of it. He was hitting the hit-ahead passes. He was going. He knew what they needed to do to win, and Chris Paul, for whatever you want to say about him, that guy only cares about winning. If the way they're going to win is him scoring 0 points, he'll score 0 points. He doesn't care. If what they need is for him to go off the second half like he did here, he'll go off the second half. That's all that guy cares about, and he did it tonight. And I trust that in the finals, if for whatever reason we're tied 2-2 and Chris Paul hasn't looked good in a couple of games in a row or whatever, I trust that you Suns fans out there, if any of you listeners were the ones who doubted him, I don't think you're going to do that again.
No, I think he's proved it time and time again now in the purple and orange, and we got to ride right to the end with him. And I think it's funny that games 4 and 5 versus game 6 is almost a mirror image of, I guess, those early 10 to 15 games in the regular season, and they struggled and then managed to flick a switch, and that's what seemed to happen in game 6 for this one. But other than, once again mentioning just loving the retrospection and introspection from Chris Paul in his post-game interviews, I think we're ready to move on, keep this train humming along at a decent pace here, Max, and I think this is where it's going to get really fascinating. I really have no idea who you're going to have for 2 and 1, and I'm sure you're feeling the same.
I absolutely am, I think the honorable mentions are pretty close to the 2 and 1. So especially my 1, I went pretty crazy on my 1, but we'll start with 2. So 2-star, I have Campaign, David.
I have him in my stars, but not with the 2-star. But let's go with Campaign now, and we can end at least the first segment with my 2-star before we get into the other guys later.
Yeah, so it's a tough one because his series stats, again, are not good overall if you look at them.
Yep.
About 10 points per game. Part of that's not fair because he left game 3 super early. 41, 32, 75 splits. Only a 47% true shooting, David, which is like Josh Jackson stuff. 5.2 assists to 0.7 turnovers is good. Mainly he's here for me because of the first 2 games of the series. Particularly, obviously, game 2 was unbelievably good with 29, 9 assists, 0 turnovers, 2 steals, 2 blocks, several huge plays down the stretch. Really, maybe other than 8, or maybe even above 8, and the reason we won that game, honestly.
Yep.
And then game 1 I thought was also great. His first game, thrust into the starting role. 11-9, 1 turnover on 50% shooting. Just very steady in that game. Exactly what we needed next to Booker when Booker was doing his thing. So largely gave it to him on the power of that. He, obviously got hurt and it kind of hurt the rest of the series, but that was my thinking on that, David. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you've kind of covered 2 of my first 3 notes here. 1 star was tough for me. I ended up going with Campaign because he was a top 2 player in one of the 4 wins. There's only 4 wins in a series, and he had his fingerprints all over one of those, so you have to recognize that. And then my next thing was kind of just a rhetorical question, like how many teams have a guy sitting there on the bench that can come in and give you a career high 29, 9, and 0 turnovers when Chris Paul is out with COVID and win you a game, basically. And you mentioned plus minus before with Devin Booker. Of all the plus 20-minute guys on this team, so the heavy rotation players, he was a team high plus 5.2 in this series as well, which I thought was very illustrative of the series that he had. So he definitely deserves to be mentioned here. And you even touch right at the top there with probably the most important note, the assist to turnover ratio. Like, even though he's not huge, flashy in every game, I don't think it can be undersold how important it is to not only have Chris Paul, barely ever turn the ball over, but then also be able to rely on his backup to come in and do the same thing. And it's such a key kind of hallmark of championship teams that they just don't turn the ball over, Max. And it's huge that a guy, who's been with the team for 1.3 seasons and is on a minimum contract at the moment is giving you that kind of reliability.
Yeah, how freaking much do you think Chris Paul loves Campaign for not turning the ball over? That's Chris Paul's favorite thing ever, right? So the fact that his backup comes in and doesn't do it, he must adore Campaign's play. But you're so right. That's such a key point. It's such a huge part of why he matters. Like, your backup point guard in particular is someone you just want to not hurt you. And so when he does the game 2 stuff and when he's like blowing up, like that's gravy. But if he's just not hurting you and giving you that scoring punch you need when you have the backups out there, it's so huge. And man, I hope we're able to keep Cam Payne. I really do. I don't think we will at this point. I think he's played too well, especially if he has a big finals. But no matter what happens, man, if that guy goes and gets $20 million somewhere else, I will root for him for the rest of my life.
That's funny. The one question I was going to throw at you is, is he on the Suns next season? I thought I was going to put you on the spot there, but
I freaking hope so, dude.
Yeah, you've already answered. I guess the key thing there is they can only offer him 105% of the average NBA salary, which is around $10 million this year and probably will be very similar next year. So as you said, if anyone's offering him a much bigger raise than that, then it would be remiss of him not to take it, given where he's come from on his NBA journey, Max.
Unless Chris Paul just loves it here so much, he wants to take a 3-year, $30 million deal. We can do some things. All right, how would you give me your 2-star now? Which I don't think your 2-star is going to be my 1-star, David. I went kind of crazy. So what's your 2-star?
Yeah, I reckon I can tell who yours is just through who you're alluding to. So we can definitely go right up the top. Actually, you'll have to give it so we can finish off with the leaderboard here, but then we'll maybe talk about him after Did You Know.
Yep.
But my 2-star is Cam Johnson, Max.
Yep, and that's the one I should have put 1-star, but for sentimental reasons I didn't. Go ahead and go through it. He was awesome.
He had 10.8 points per game. His shooting splits were 70, 53, 100. He had 4 rebounds per game. He had 1.2 steals per game. But as we have with Cam all of these episodes about the playoffs, the more important thing is when you adjust it for per 36, because at the moment he's on, sub 20 minutes for the playoffs, and in the LA Clippers series, 23.8 minutes is what he averaged. But per 36 in this series, he had 16.3 points per game, 2.7 threes made, 6 rebounds. He had 1.8 steals, 0.6 assists. But the interesting thing for me, I thought he took it up a notch in this series, but you compare that to his playoffs per 36, not much difference. 14.2 points per game, the same 2.7 threes, 5.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, and 1.9 steals over the entire playoffs. So he is who he is at this point in the playoffs, Max. I thought we were going to really miss him in that Game 6 when he was a late out. Thankfully, they got over it. And I just think his underrated play was worthy of spotlighting him here for 2 stars, not only for the Clippers series, but for the playoffs as a whole, Max.
Yeah, I'm glad we ended up doing this, because this guy, he needs to be on the star board, and my guy, I think, does too. But the thing about Cam Johnson, did you listen to Mike Schwartz on Zach Lowe today?
I did. I just finished it before we jumped on, so I'm prepared.
I loved hearing Zach Lowe bring up how the Clippers personnel were so impressed by Cam Johnson. I mean, Cam Johnson was killing them, man. He was killing them.
Yes.
He was 5 for 5 in that in the Game 2. A hugely underrated part of why we won Game 2, I think. 86% true shooting in the series, David. That is scorching. That is ridiculous, honestly. And like you said, he's been the most underrated player of the entire playoffs for sure. I think I gave him 1 star in. I didn't give him 1 star in the Lakers series, but I mentioned him as like a strong honorable mention because he was really damn good in that series too. At the end of the day, I think every Suns fan panicked when he wasn't going to play in Game 6, at least a little bit.
100%.
Fortunately, they pulled it out. But man, he was so important to us. And fortunately, it sounds like it was just food poisoning or something, so he should be totally fine for the finals.
Yep.
Excited to see him. I'd like to see him get more of a shine. I hope he has like a really big game in the finals so he gets more credit, because he's been underserved, I think, by the way the games have gone out. He's just been like consistently good, never exploded.
He's in the right spot always, is the note that I have written down.
Yep.
I think it ended up being a loss, but the play that really stands out to me is he got an offensive rebound coming from the corner, kind of shovel flick past it to Devin Booker for a layup underneath the basket, and it started a little mini run that they couldn't end up backing up and getting the win. But he's just always in the right spot on both ends, and then just does his job. He was 55% on wide open threes in this series. He's absolutely crushing it from the corners in the playoffs overall, 15 of 27, which is also 55%. But he's attacking as well. He's 72% inside 5 feet for the entire playoffs. And yeah, I had it written down, 23.8 minutes in this, playing basically as well as he possibly could. for him to play that well and only get that, it's like, I know it's hard for Monty to find minutes elsewhere at the moment, but for him to have that big shining game, Monty's got to play him. And I don't know the answer, but, I think no matter who we get in the finals, I think he's going to need to play more, particularly if a couple of guys that we might get to later continue to struggle in the first couple of games of the final. So that's the really interesting thing. We did a quick future look with Cam Payne, so I'll do another future question here for Cam Johnson. Can he still be a starting 4 on this Suns team? Because it's really the only way he's going to be able to start with this core at least, Max.
I think that he can be one for sure. I mean, I think that just because he's older doesn't mean he won't get stronger and better as an NBA player.
Yep.
He's still very young. The question is going to be whether he could be on the Suns or not because of the salary situation.
Yes.
I don't know how they're going to handle that. I mean, people want to say the reason why the Suns are doing what they're doing is because of injuries. No, it's because they're paying Cam Johnson $4.2 million a year and Mikal Bridges $4.3 million a year.
Yep.
And DeAndre Ayton $10 million. That's why they can do this, guys. Because they're super, super deep because they're paying really, really damn good players, like minimum contracts, the other two. So, yes, I think the answer to the question is yes, he can be the long-term 4. For us or some other team, it's just going to be a question of whether we can keep him salary-wise.
Yep, and that Kelly Oubre trade or salary discussion just makes all more sense now. With Cam Johnson, Mikal, Torrey Craig, even Abdul Nader, all their salaries combined is probably still less than what Kelly Oubre was going to make on the Suns this season. And that's how you, have such a deep team, Max. We are timing this beautifully with just the hour mark, which is what we like to get to before Did You Know? So we'll end with the leaderboard here, and I'll do it by trying to guess your 1 star that you're going to come back from Did You Know with. I'm going to go...
Yeah, good luck. I'm sure you'll be able to get it.
I'm going with Torrey Craig, Max.
You know me too well.
So... if we go reverse order then on the leaderboard so far before the NBA Finals, and this probably means we're going to have to come back after the Finals, no matter how it goes, Max, because we've got to round this leaderboard out for the entire playoffs. But we've got Torrey Craig sitting at the bottom of people who have at least been counted with 1 star. We have Cam Johnson with 2 stars. Mikal Bridges, no stars this time around, but he still sits in third last at 5 stars. Cam Payne, Jay Crowder is next with 7. Cam Payne above him with 8. The third best player as voted by us so far through the playoffs, Max, and maybe only for availability reasons, is Chris Paul with 19 stars. And a quick drum roll, Devin Booker is second on the leaderboard with 24 stars. And DeAndre Ayton, like we wondered last episode whether it might be the case if we were going to the NBA Finals, sits at the top of the leaderboard with 25 stars and a 1-star lead on Devin Booker, Max. That is fascinating.
Well, David, no one can ever call us DeAndre Ayton haters ever again, can they? That's amazing. I'm so happy for him. That's the best thing ever, that he is that. The fact that he is... Guess what? I don't care about the 2018 draft anymore. Never talk to me about it again. I don't care.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. DeAndre Ayton was a great pick. I don't care. I don't care about anything else.
I agree.
All right, David, let's do Did You Know before we get into my Torrey Craig Loveathon.
All right, Max, my promise to you and the listeners for the next 2 episodes is that we will keep Did You Know short and sweet. We've got more important things to discuss after all. But what I can't make any guarantees on is that there won't be some tough trivia questions still coming your way. So did you know, Max, that the Suns' first finals appearance came in 1976? Of course you did. But can you tell me what their regular season record was in that season, Max?
Oh, it wasn't good. I think they were 500 or something close to it.
Oh, you're pretty much on the money. 42-40, a win-loss percentage good enough to slide into the 10th seed playoff in season 2021 this year, Max. Let me tell you and the listeners a little bit about that Phoenix Suns team, nicknamed the Cinderella Suns by the end, and I'll throw a few tests in there for a little bit of fun too. Starting at center in those finals, Max, the Suns drafted this guy 4th overall in the preceding offseason, and he went on to become the Rookie of the Year and eventually have his number 33 retired by the Suns. That is, of course, Max...
Is that Albert Adams?
It is. 1 for 1 or 2 for 2 will give you, I reckon. Now moving to one of the starting guard slots, the Suns drafted another guy that year by trading back into the draft at 16 with a future pick sent the other way. That became Ricky Sobers. I won't test you on that one. So
Thank you. I wouldn't have gotten it.
starting 2 rookies in the finals, and we thought the current Suns were young, Max. The other guard slot now, though, a pretty famous Suns name, Max, and a guy who went on to coach in the Suns' next final appearance. That one is...
Yeah, I'm not going to screw that one up, Dave. That's Paul Westphal.
Exactly, and he came via trade that offseason too, switching places with Charlie Scott in Boston. Max, how's this for a quote from Jerry Colangelo after making that trade? It takes a team concept of play to win in this league. Although Charlie Scott is a talent, our decision was made on the basis that Scott's talents were of an individual nature and did not fit into a team style of play. In Paul Westphal, we are acquiring a player from a winning situation. He is stable, quality individual who will add leadership and experience to our club. We are confident that this decision will prove to be a major step in developing a winner and that the Phoenix Suns are more important than any one individual.
That would have been like a 48-hour NBA Twitter story, at least, if that happened now.
That was exactly what I was thinking. Pretty strong from Jerry, but at least he was right. Paul went on to make 4 All-Star games in a row and get 4 All-NBA nods. Charlie Scott never made an All-Star game again after the trade. The next guy, Max, I believe, has his name called out by Al McCoy in our intro. He also played a game-high 61 minutes in the famous triple overtime Game 5, who some refer to as the greatest game ever played. Any ideas who that is, Max?
Really, I mean, the only thing that pops out is the shot from Gar Hurd.
It was Gar Hurd who manned one of the forward spots and was acquired via trade during the season in exchange for John Shumate, or I've butchered that name and no idea how to say it. And that leaves one last starting spot at the other forward slot, and I won't put you on the spot for this one either. It was Curtis Perry. The best bit of trivia with Perry is how he arrived in Phoenix. Whilst he was the only final starter who was on the Suns in the prior season, he did come via trade just one season earlier. But who did Phoenix trade to get him? Max, the 1969 draft, famous for the coin flip where the Suns lost and missed out on a chance to draft Lou Alcindor, aka Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But what, or should I say who, was the second prize?
Milwaukee?
It was, of course, Neil Walk, and you're on fire again, who played 5 seasons for the Suns before being traded to the New Orleans Jazz for a package that helped build this 76 finals team. Along with Perry, the Suns also received Dennis Autry and Nate Hawthorne, who were rotation pieces on the team. A team that also featured Dick Van Arsdale as its 6th man and a guy by the name of Pat Riley in his final NBA season, Max. But Max, I promised to keep it as brief as possible, so let's race through the heartbreak now. Those Suns beat Seattle in 6, followed by the Warriors in 7, and then the infamous 6-game series against Boston to lose the NBA Finals. Now, before we end, a little clue for you and the listeners out there. Next episode, on the eve of the Suns' 3rd final appearance, we will focus on the 93 finals run by the Suns. So time to study up, everybody listening. But with us talking about 75-76 this episode and 92-93 next, allow me to please rehash a fun Did You Know fact from a few episodes ago, plus I'll add a new one in. Max, you may or may not remember I touched upon the fact that the Suns' 3rd largest playoff drought was broken when the Suns went to the Western Conference Finals in 88-89, and that the 2nd largest drought culminated in the very 75-76 finals loss we are talking about today. Which of course means, Max, the trend is still alive. The Suns have a chance to turn their longest ever playoff drought into a finals win in season 2021 and keep the trend going. But a new one to add for you and the listeners. Coach of the 75-76 team was John McLeod, who made the finals in his 3rd year with the Suns. Next episode will focus on Paul Westphal and his 92-93 team, where he was in his 1st year with the Suns. So what now makes up the trifecta? Of course, it's Monty Williams, who's in his 2nd year with the Suns and taking the Suns to the 3rd finals appearance of all time, meaning we have finals coaches with 1, 2, and 3 years experience at the helm. So Max, that will do for Did You Know, ending with a little symmetry there, but how about we stick to our usual symmetry as well and cover off the last of our notes on the Clippers series before we close this one out.
I love it, David. I remember very clearly. Yeah, you asked me if I remember. Of course, I remember, David, when you brought that up. And I remember saying after you say that, David, I think we're going to win the finals now. I think we're going to win. And I was half joking, and now I'm telling you very seriously, David, I think we're going to win the finals.
I believe.
Oh man, knock on wood. All right. Let's get to our honorable mentions here. Starting with one that's actually not my honorable mention. He's my one-star, David.
Yep.
As we already mentioned. He's Torrey Craig. So, I mean, I think you know what I'm about to say here, David. But I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. I'm not even going to say a word about his stats. I don't care about his stats. Irrelevant. He came into the game in Game 6, and he made Paul George's life miserable. And by virtue of making Paul George's life miserable, he gave the Clippers no chance to win. It's the way I look at the game. Not only was he doing that defensively, he hit a massive three during one of our runs.
Huge three.
He also was getting rebound after rebound. Some of his offensive rebounds were just amazing, David. He was flying out of nowhere and grabbing offensive rebounds that should have been the Clippers' ball.
Yep.
During key stretches and giving us back. I think like both times, and this isn't him, but like we just ended up scoring. I think when he did that every single time.
Yep.
Just made it feel even more impactful. It's just. I mean, listen, I know that I'm overreacting to one game, and I fully acknowledge that, but I don't care. It's the most important game, right? That's the game that everyone thought the Suns were going to choke on. Bill Simmons talking about how the Suns are going to choke, CP3 is going to choke, all that stuff. Like, that's the game that you really got to win. That's get down to business time, and I think he was our third best player, maybe fourth best player in that game. If you're going to put Booker above him, I might put him above Booker, honestly, in that game. That's how good I think Torrey Craig was, David.
He was phenomenal. I think Bill Simmons has got the Clippers in 8, by the way, just in case you haven't listened to the latest episode yet. But I think you touched on everything there. I wanted to give you the floor. I knew you were going to rave about his defense, which I definitely don't want to undersell. But I want to mention the 3 and the offensive boards that you threw in the mix there. 1.3 offensive boards in just 14 minutes in this series. And the thing that I love about that is if a guy gets left open as the non-shooter, he's got to do 2 things. When the ball swings to him and he's open, he's got to shoot it.
Yep.
And he did that with that huge 3 at the top of the key when Devin Booker, I believe it was, threw him the ball, knocked it down. 50% on 1 3 a game, by the way. So he's taking and making the right shots. But the other thing you got to do is you've got a runway for offensive boards if they're leaving you that open, because guys aren't getting a body on you. And we mentioned it time and time again after acquiring Torrey Craig. He brings athleticism to this team that they don't have, and it pops off the screen with some of those plays that he makes. And I just thought that his Game 6 was phenomenal. As we said at the top, everyone gives stars for different reasons, and I am not going to begrudge you giving him one just for that cameo, I suppose, because I think he was really important in closing out the series. And his defense on George, both on the ball, denying him off the ball, bumping him off his spots, just physical, and kind of brought a different dynamic to another guy that we might mention here as we go through, the rest of the rotation players in this series, and just frankly did it better than the other guy was able to. Max.
Last thing I want to say on Craig, because I think it's a lot one game, but I'll also say we didn't win Game 5. It was a horrible freaking game. But in the fourth quarter, Torrey Craig was a big reason why we even had a chance to win that game.
Yep.
He was a huge part of the run that got us within 4. And then the other thing I'll say is, if we had for some reason lost Game 6, for however what had happened, it's impossible. Obviously, we outclassed them, but in the hypothetical world, Game 7, Torrey Craig would have been oh god, we had to play that guy 35 to 40 minutes, right? So that just shows you how big he was in Game 6. If that series would have continued, he was going to be a huge piece of it, and to me, that kind of earned a star.
Yep, I've no arguments from me. So, how about we talk about a few of the others? There's one guy I've said it there that I want to kind of focus on him a little bit more. So, I'll throw you 2 other names first. See if you've got anything to mention on either Jay Crowder or Dario Saric, Max. Probably worth touching on the tech situation for Jay Crowder, like we did with Devin Booker, if we've got at least nothing else to say. It was a pretty nothing series from Jay, except for that Game 6 where he stood up, and I guess a lot of people stood up, Max.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay Crowder, and I felt bad not giving him a star just for Game 6 the way I did with Craig. He wasn't quite as impactful as Craig, but I mean, when we, in the kind of late first quarter / late second quarter / early first quarter or third quarter.
Yep.
When we were starting to struggle a little bit. Like he was just hitting 3 after 3. Like
Yeah.
all 5 of his threes came when like we absolutely freaking needed him to make those threes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those were like we were up 20 already threes, which I still value quite a bit. But like those were threes that were like making the margin from 4 to 7 or from 5 to 8. Like those are threes you really need to hit.
I think I've stumbled onto a point here. I suppose I had written down that he bookended his series really well. Game 1 and 6 versus the rest of the series. I think he was very, very different. I think he had 32 points combined in those games versus 18 in the other 4 games. He had 8 threes versus 4 in the other 4 games. And the point that I've probably stumbled on here is that he plays well when the other stars do, and he's such a complimentary great piece. So Devin Booker goes off in game 1, and Jay Crowder steps up, and Chris Paul goes off in game 6, and he's able to step up and be that secondary piece. So I think that is emblematic of what I've talked about with Jay pretty much all season. He's a great complementary piece that can knock down those wide open shots when the stars are getting all the attention, Max.
That's a really great point, and that's a player you need, right? Because your stars can play great, but to have your team be really, really good, it's when your stars play great, and that causes the entire team to just be an avalanche, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I totally agree. The other guy, I do want to really talk about Dario because statistically, the statistics in the eye test really don't agree on him, David. He was he led the team in net rating by guys who actually played a decent amount with 20.8, which is crazy because I feel like all I ever wanted to do when he was on the floor was get him off the floor. What do you think about that, David, when you hear that?
I guess the thing that I love about it is, I think particularly in the early, I remember that game 1, I'd be interested to know what his net rating was after game 1, because I think the early panic could have come from Monty when DeMarcus Cousins had, 3 or 4 quick, easy buckets, but they stuck with it and eventually punished DeMarcus Cousins on the other end. I would hazard a guess that game plus the really late surge in the late third, early fourth when Dario and DeMarcus were on probably really boosted that stat, I suppose, which is why you can't trust it all the time and you do have to have the eye test, because he genuinely struggled in some of the other parts of all the games going up against Boogie, and I've got a real soft spot for Dario, which I think Monty does too, and I can understand why people want to completely go away from him. But by God, those 2 big threes that he hit in Game 6 is just such a show of the faith that Monty places in him. And I don't think he hits those shots if he's called upon in a pinch after being benched for multiple games on end, because I think a huge skill of Monty is being able to keep these guys confident in their abilities. And he rolled with him. It was, really only about 10 minutes per game, which was, just enough to limit the damage on the other end. And I think he just likes his facilitator and ability to attack kind of off the dribble. I know it doesn't always look pretty, but it is effective in moments as well, Max.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about it. I mean, you're totally right to point out the 2 threes. Those are massive threes, like the ones I talked about with Jay. Those mattered a lot.
Yeah.
And then also, I think he got fouled and he got to the line like for the first time in the whole game for anybody to get fouled. Remember that?
Yes.
Like 60 minutes to get fouled.
Exactly.
I think he was the one who broke that seal and hit 2 free throws. So absolutely. I mean, that was huge. And then, but at the same time, like when he didn't play in the second half and they decided to just roll Hayton and Craig, like that was the right decision and we felt good about that, right?
100%. I think I commented on one of your tweets that, something we've always loved about Monty, and we might get a little bit more into Monty in a minute, is that, he may not make the decision we all want him to when we want him to, but he does eventually get there, and late is better than never. And with a lot of other coaches we're seeing in the playoffs, it generally is never rather than late. So, I try and look at the positive side of that as well.
I could not agree more.
All
right, do you have another person to talk to, or do you want to go to Monty now?
I want to quickly talk about Mikhail.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about him a lot on this pod. I'm a little bit disappointed, to be honest, in the playoffs as a whole, and particularly this series. Probably the thing that I'm most disappointed in is the 3-point percentage has gone from 38 to 33 to 31, and the attempts in each series has gone from 34 to 21 to 19 in a 6-game series here against the Clippers. So, I've said it all along, I don't mind if the splits fluctuate, but he stopped shooting again, which is that moment in 2 seasons ago where we started to get really frustrated with him, and I thought that had gone, and his confidence just looks a little bit shot at the moment. And for myself, I feel like I'm taking a huge loss here because I talked up for many, many years since drafting him that Suns fans were going to see the most of his value when the games mattered. And the games really matter now. And he's, I don't know if I'm being too hard on him, but I just feel like he has underperformed a little bit, Max. Can you talk me away from the ledge, or are you right there with me?
So half and half. So I would say I think the way you're feeling, the way you described Mikal's play applies entirely to the Clippers series, and I couldn't agree more. The whole thing. I think it was a disappointing series. I think it's hard to say it wasn't. The Denver series, though, he was quite good in, especially in Game 1. And then the Lakers series, remember, he had to guard LeBron and did a great job with it, and also hit like 38%. Like you said, it got worse throughout. So, I think his first 2 series were totally fine. Wasn't a superstar, but was great. But you're exactly right about that series. It was not good for him. He couldn't make shots. He wasn't aggressive enough. I mean, I don't want to totally undersell him. He didn't do it, not at all. He did do some driving in. He had a nice and one in Game 6. He was take a couple jumpers, but overall it wasn't what you wanted to see. And I mean, when he airballed that 3 in the third, I tweeted they should take him out.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't he end up playing 24 minutes to Craig's 31 in this game? Guess what? That was totally warranted. Craig was better than him in that game and in the series. And it really doesn't make me worry too much about him his long-term future. It's a very small sample size. Kind of a bad matchup for him, it seemed like.
Yeah.
Listen, it's not great. It's hard to defend.
Yeah, I don't want to be too negative. There were still some good things. Like, he had some big rebounding games and averaged 5 for the series. His assists remain solid at 2.2, which is pretty much right in line with his regular season numbers. His pick and roll defense with Ayton is still very, very good, and something that this team really leans on, and he's got a huge workload there. He's still an absolute monster in transition both ways, to be honest. He finishes everything going our way, and he stops a lot going the other way too, which isn't always recognized and noticed. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm really beating up on him. I just think maybe the Paul George matchup was a bad one for him. He's still probably more suited to those smaller guards at the point of attack, and if there isn't one of those matchups, they're probably better off putting him more in that safety role. I thought probably before Torrey really showed his worth that Jay was probably the best matchup that they had for PG, just in their individual kind of duels that all the guys were having, and Mikal just really struggled. He still needs to bulk up a bit, which isn't a huge revelation. I know a lot of people have made note of that, Max.
Yeah, the Torrey Craig thing definitely showed why he needs to bulk up a little bit, and why. I mean, Torrey Craig was a better Paul George defender than Mikal Bridges was, just easily, right? So it's obvious.
Yeah.
But I do want to defend Mikal to this extent, and here's why. We should give the Clippers credit. They were really, really damn good in that series, in my opinion, really good. And especially defensively, I think they were underrated. Again, Chris Paul, 52% true shooting. Devin Booker, 49% true shooting. Campaign, 47% true shooting. It was really hard to score in this team. And because of Mikal's transition stuff, he still had a true shooting of 58% in this series. He was definitely more efficient than those guys. But he wasn't at his normal level of efficiency, and his volume wasn't there. So he definitely didn't have a good series. I'm not trying to say he did. But I think that the overall suppressive effect that the Clippers had on the Suns affected him even more than everybody else.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think that's all the discussion we need to have on Mikal. You mentioned the Clippers there. I wanted to just make sure that we did mention them.
Yeah.
I walk away from this series pretty impressed.
Yes.
And the narrative, I feel, has completely flipped. Paul George, I still hate the villain thing with him. It reminds me of LeBron when he tried to become the villain at the Heat. It just doesn't suit him. It just doesn't really work. And Reggie Jackson, dude. Holy shit. 20 points per game, 4 rebounds, 3.7 assists, shot 45, 36, 80. We spoke about Payne before, contract and team, Max. Is he going to stay with the Clippers? They probably need to try and keep him with their
that's
salary
so funny.
situation.
I was literally just about to ask you, hey, if we were a Clippers podcast, I would ask you if Reggie Jackson's, what's he going to make? Because that is a huge question. I mean, he's definitely not going to be on the Clippers next year, because they don't have bird rights on him, right?
Yeah. And
he's going to make $20 million a year, right?
Yeah, it's the exact same, I believe, situation as Campaign. Came in too late to get bird rights, and therefore he'd be a tier above Payne, I think, just because of his pedigree as well and what he did.
Well, not only his pedigree, but also Payne was great, and in the playoffs has been great. Reggie Jackson has been like a second star in the playoffs.
Yeah. And Ty Lue, hell of a coach to go up against. Monty eventually got him, but Monty had probably more levers to pull as well than Ty did in the end. So quite the battle, and Ty definitely threw every punch that he possibly could in this bout, Max.
And there were more too. Like Zubac was great. Loved Zubac in this series. Terrence Mann I respect a lot. I think he's a great hustle player and makes a lot of plays. Beverly, until he turned into a jackass, was having a great series. Straight up, I know we all hate him. I hate him too. He was awesome defensively against Booker and Paul for a lot of that series. He just was.
You know what? I know we've referenced it a few times. We had a number of podcasts where we wanted Patrick Beverley on the Suns for pretty much most of the stuff that he did in this series, but I was really disappointed with the end, because despite the accidental broken nose, despite him mocking a potentially injured Chris Paul, I was kind of willing to look over most of that. The only maybe small saving grace was, I'm not sure if you saw him tweet at Chris Paul today and apologize for what he did, and I thought that was, things do get hot, you make bad decisions, but I was really disappointed with that moment from Patrick.
It's certainly better that he apologized than that he didn't. But, I mean, it's a tough thing to just get a tweet apology for. Like, you could have fucking hurt Chris Paul badly there. Like, really hurt him.
Very badly.
You could have ended his
And
playoffs.
he didn't even say anything.
I know. Didn't do anything.
He didn't even say anything. That was the thing.
It was awful. It was just, that dude just didn't control his frustration at all, clearly. And that's what he said. Yeah. I feel bad for him. I don't think he's a bad person, probably. I just think he can't control himself, basically.
Can we quickly mention Chris Paul's reaction, though?
Yeah. When he was acting like he was dead, and then he jumps up and starts celebrating like a Rocky movie.
It starts laughing, like, oh man, he just knew that he'd broken him, and he said it after the game. I just thought it was perfect.
Just think about it, David. They're in the locker room beforehand, and Monty is giving them the whole speech on how, like, you guys have to keep your cool. We're gonna make them be the guys.
Yeah.
Like, that was just an achievement. Like, they won their objective.
Yep, they did. They finally broke him, and it took 6 games, but they got there. But we're getting towards the pointy end here, and I know that you've got some stuff still loaded in the gun, so get to it, Max.
We'll go fast. Okay, so let's do Monty talk real quick.
Yep.
We've talked about a lot of stuff already, but I want to point out, beginning of Game 6, when you see Booker just slowly slide out of that Morris matchup and Jay run over like that. That was great.
Yep.
You could and then they push the ball. Basically, everything that Monty did in Game 6 was the exact opposite of what he did in Game 5. I loved it. The only thing I hate still is the timeout thing.
Yep.
He can't keep doing that. He has to stem those tides. Like, it was obvious, especially the first one. It was so obvious that he was 3 possessions late, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the best way that I can put it is amazing pre-planner, average in-game adjustment guy.
Yes.
And I still think that there's a big difference there, and it can bite you in those really close moments. The Suns actually haven't been in too many close moments, so we haven't probably seen it as a negative as much in these playoffs as it possibly could have been, and I hope that it doesn't come up in the finals, but that's the easiest way that I can put it. The only other thing that I want to touch on, it's just an incredible story.
Yes.
Him, CP3, Willie Green, all having the history that they do, and getting to this point. I absolutely loved him bringing Coach Ayres into the press conference with him at the end and touching on the fact that they'd been kind of working together over 20 years, starting in New Orleans as well. I just wanted to touch on that. We're going to get a lot of feature stories in the next week about Monty Williams, and he deserves every single one of them.
So, David, we haven't talked about this yet so much. Who was most responsible for the play that won us a game in this series, the Valley-oop, would you say?
Jay Triano?
Yeah, maybe, but Jay Triano had it done in the regular season, had the guts to do it. Who kind of had that play ready to go in this game? Like, who's the one who told Ayton what to do?
I believe Willie Green is in charge of the defense and Jones is in charge of the offense. So, these guys don't get shout-outs very often. My guess would be Kevin, to be honest. I think that it's probably someone like that who has it in the pocket, just in case they need it. What do you think?
Okay, well, you're probably right about that, David, but I'm going to go narrative style here. The video showed Bonnie saying, like, hey, go dunk it if it gets up there or whatever, Dayton.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, the assistants make the suggestions. It's still the head guy that goes with the decision. So, yeah, I think that's probably a solid guess.
Yeah, I think that's why I would put it that way. Yeah, you're right. The actual strategy of the play wasn't Monty drawing it up, but the person responsible for that play even being the play is got to be him. He's the general out there, right? So... But, obviously, Jay Crowder, the pass was great. Ayton, the play was great. Booker, the screen was great. There was a lot to that.
So much.
But overall, I thought it was a lot of Monty. And, man, I don't care about timeouts. If you're going to be so good at everything else, Bonnie, you can suck at timeouts. I'm fine with it. If you're going to leave Ayton and Craig in and not play Nader and Sarge in the second half of that game, I know you played Nader in the first half, but at least you stopped it. Listen, you can do whatever else you want, as far as I'm concerned.
It's a lot easier when they win.
Yeah. Well, I think the winner horse likes to say it. Winning means you never have to say you're sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more thing for you, David. I don't know if you have anything else.
That's it from me.
All right, we'll do this quick. This is the game score thing I referred to earlier.
Yep.
So there are 6 game scores from this Suns playoff run that are in the top 100 in Suns history.
6, okay.
6 total. And just in case you remember last time, I accidentally told you that there were 2 other Booker ones in the 80s. I filtered wrong. They weren't.
Oh, okay.
So now there's a total of 6, okay? So one of them we went over in the podcast already. It was number 6 in the overall 100, and that's Booker's Game 6 closeout. That's still the top one, okay?
Okay.
All right, the one you mentioned earlier is number 20 overall, and that's Booker Game 1 LAC, 34.5, right?
Yep.
So the 2 of the other ones are right behind those, number 7 overall and number 21 overall. They're by the same player, not by Booker, but by the same player, those 2. And they're right behind each of them. One of them is 0.3 behind, number 7 is behind number 6, and the other one's 0.2 behind. Number 21 behind number 20. Can you guess what those 2 games are?
You've spun my head here. I'm not even sure whether I'm supposed to be guessing a current player or a past player here, Max.
Oh, sorry. So it's another player on the team, but it's not Booker.
Okay. So it has to be Chris Paul?
It is Chris Paul. Can you guess what 2 games they were?
Well, obviously the one we just saw, Game 6.
Yep, that was the one that was right behind Booker's Game 6 in LA.
Yep. And then it must be the other one that I piled in together, which would be Game 4 against the Nuggets.
That is right. That is right behind Booker's Game 1 of the Clippers.
Wow.
They're literally almost tied in game score with those 2.
Incredible.
All right, there's 2 more. Number 60 and number 81 overall. One of them is by the player you just mentioned. I'll say that. Can you guess who that one is? Number 60?
DeAndre Ayton?
No. The player you just mentioned. The player we just talked about.
Oh, Chris Paul. So it has to be another one from.
I'll say it surprised me a little
these
bit when I saw
playoffs.
it.
God, it's got to be the Denver series because he wasn't very good in the LA Lakers one.
It was Denver.
God, those games are a huge blur for me. I'll just take a punt here. Game 2 of the Denver series.
It was Game 3 of the Denver series. So it was the two road games in Denver. Were number 21, number 60 overall in Suns history. There was one more of these, David. Number 81 of the 100, it was not by the 2 players who had the other 2, Booker and Paul. You want to take a stab at it?
I feel like it's the guy that I just said. The only other one that I could think of is maybe Campaign having a out-of-the-box one.
You're getting a little closer.
Campaign's 29 and 9 with 0 turnovers?
That is correct. That is the 81st best game score in Suns history. Those are the only ones. Isn't that amazing?
So game score hates big men then?
Well, I think it's a lot of Ayton's value is not statistics. He's not putting up a lot of points, right? You got to get a lot of points for these, I think is the thing. But I thought that was really interesting. I'm happy Campaign got that list. He deserves that.
That's awesome. And probably finish with my recent catch cry here of say it with me, folks, because DeAndre Ayton, his game isn't measured by the stats, and that just speaks volumes.
Yeah, isn't it? We gave him the most stars of the whole playoff run, and he wasn't among the six games that made that amazing stuff. All right, I guess it's time for 7 seconds or less, David.
I can't wait. I've got some beauties for you here, I think, Max.
All right, you go ahead and start then.
All right, there's a change to the CBA, and you can offer Mikal Bridges his extension between now and the start of the finals. What's your offer?
Oh man, that's an interesting one. I mean, I think you try to lowball him for that series, right? See what you can do. I think I would go 4 years, $100 million.
Yeah, and I'd still do it.
But what would you say?
I was thinking you would. Yeah, I guess I'm the team here who's just talked about how poor he was and tried to lowball 5 minutes ago. So I'd probably try for 420 average, so 480. But yeah, I think he's not going to accept that. So, it's a bad offer if that's what you're going for.
I'll agree with you. All right. This is the, I guess, 4th time I've now asked you this question, David. Or maybe the 3rd time. But which team between Milwaukee and Atlanta, I will let you know, I don't know if you saw, Milwaukee did win the game going away.
Okay.
Okay. They're still battling to beat us in the finals. Which one do you want to play against?
I'll let you in on a little secret. We may or may not end up discussing it depending on gets through. I am terrified of Trae Young.
Interesting. I kind of agree with you, man. I'd rather play Milwaukee.
I just don't think he's a player that we've had to play in these playoffs. It would be a completely different look that they'd have to prepare for. So if it's a Giannis less Bucks, I'm definitely picking them. And even if it's with a 80% Giannis, I think I might still go the Bucks, Max.
Before the series started, I was still kind of wanting the Bucks more. Coach Bud sucks. Like Monty will beat him. I just want them more. All right, give me yours.
You can guarantee peak performance from any non-campaign bench player in the finals. We don't even know who we're playing yet, but who do you choose, Max?
That's such an interesting question. You know, I think I might surprise you with my answer. I think I'm going to go with Dario Saric.
Ooh.
Because if you get peak Dario on the second unit, like I think we're just going to win every game. We'll probably sweep, right?
Yeah. I mean, he was very bad, Dario, and still had the best net rating on the team. So, yeah, peak Dario would be amazing.
All right. So, other than figuring out the Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal situations and re-signing campaign, what do you view as the biggest priority this offseason?
So, I can't choose Chris Paul or Mikal.
Nope, none of the extensions or any of that stuff or campaign.
There was something I was thinking about earlier today that I feel like would have answered this question. I can't think of what it was.
I'll let you stall. I'll give you my answer while you're stalling.
All right, go for it.
My answer is re-sign Torrey Craig. I think he gives us a really nice compliment to Mikal, like we were mentioning earlier, like a different kind of defender.
Yep.
He's been a huge part of why we're here, especially if we win the title and he's a part of it. Like, why should we need to go get a big MLE splash? We could just keep the guy that we got, you know?
That's fair, and you'll have to trust me on this. I was thinking about the MLE just before you mentioned it, which was going to save my ass for my answer in this question. It's a bit of an easy cop-out answer, but we discussed it last episode or the one before with them getting the best MLE signing last off-season, so why not do it again? It would go a long way to making them an unbeatable team next year if the Suns make the best signing, and they're going to have even more advantages up their sleeve after this finals run with the practice facility, with all the goodwill around the team, with hopefully Chris Paul coming back, Devin Booker finals MVP. They should be able to nail it, to be perfectly honest.
We should do that in our post-finals podcast, David, whether we win or lose. Like, what our MLE target that we really want, especially if we lose, because we're going to want to talk about something else.
Yes.
All right, go to the next one.
All right. This guy would have been a priority if he wasn't locked up still for 3 more seasons after this one. But Monty Williams, Max, if you had to guess, how long is he the Phoenix Suns head coach for?
I think he's going to be it for as long as he wants to be it. My guess would be, do you know how old he is?
He's pretty young, low 50s.
Low 50s? I think he'll be it for the next 10 years. I'd say 10 years. What do you think?
I think this run is, it has to go pretty bad from here.
Yeah.
And if he wins,
yeah,
I think you're right. I think
They'll never fire him.
He's got a contract for as long as he wants it, and I don't know off the top of my head. I should have looked who the longest tenured head coach is, but I know we've got a few, and he might end up right at the end there.
With how good of a person he is, they will not fire him.
Nope.
There's no way.
Nope.
He's also somebody who will just retire if he's bad, because he'll want to do something else.
Yeah, focus on his family or something, which
Exactly.
obviously is a big part of who he is.
It wouldn't surprise me if he retires early for that reason, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go into a really fun hypothetical, okay? But it's just hypothetical. I'm not jinxing anything. This is just hypothetical, okay?
Okay.
So say we win the finals rather easily, like in 5 or 6 games.
Yep.
It sort of looks like an overwhelming version, or like a less overwhelming version of what we did to Denver. Like we clearly just own them. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys contribute, but the closeout game is another one of the Chris Paul spectaculars, like Denver Game 4 and Clippers Game 6.
Yep.
And he's the Finals MVP, and it's obvious. If all that happens, where is Chris Paul ranked for you in NBA in Phoenix Suns history among your best favorite Phoenix Suns?
So he is Finals MVP.
And he's Finals MVP coming off another closeout game like he had in the last 2 series.
I mean, I already basically put him above. I said in another one of these hypotheticals that he was going to be above Steve Nash for me if he took this team to the finals. So I can't go back on that now. And Nash is number 1 on the list for me and has been for basically forever. I know that sounds ridiculous to say, guys. Devin Booker will definitely be able to take it off him if it's him in this place or going into the future. But if it is on the back of Finals MVP and another one of those performances, recency bias aside, could be up there because I'm all aboard the Chris Paul train and what he's done for this team, Max.
I'm glad you brought up Devin Booker because I could have wrote this question saying Chris Paul or Devin Booker do this because I kind of feel like they're battling for number 1 of all-time franchise history, whoever was the Finals MVP here.
Yeah, and it's an easy cop-out to kind of go, he's my favourite for now, but in probably 2 or 3 years, Devon's just going to easily take it off him because of tenure and what he will eventually do on the Suns. But if he underperforms a little bit or is just average and they win because of Chris Paul, I'm not sure how you don't say
Well, it's pretty fun, David, how there's a good chance that we'll have a new favorite Suns player of all time very, very soon. And the fact that there could be 2 different ones and both of them could end up being our 2 favorite Suns of all time. This is really fun, David.
and we don't forget, we started the podcast 20 minutes of gushing DeAndre Ayton talk, and he is 22 years old, Max.
David, it is not out of the realm of reason whatsoever that DeAndre Ayton could be the Finals MVP.
I've seen this a bit, but I think if I go off the themes of what we spoke about all episode and who votes on the Finals MVP, I think you and I might come on the pod a day later and make him our Finals MVP. I think he's going to struggle to win because I just think those people look at the stats too much and his impact is far-reaching beyond that.
I very much agree. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think it's impossible.
No.
And if it did happen, I would. If Dallas called me up and was like, "Hey, we'll trade you Luka for Ayton," I'd be like, "Screw you, dude, go away." if DeAndre Ayton wins the Finals MVP, that's the right pick, guys. I don't care. Nothing else matters anymore.
Hey, you get to tell Mark Cuban to fuck off, so it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. All right, that's it for us, David. It was fun. We'll be back next time with the preview of the final series we've been alluding to so much in this particular episode.
So much fun, guys, and go Suns.
Go Suns.
This one is over. The Suns get the win over the LA Clippers. They eliminate the Clippers. And I have to tell you this, for the 3rd time in my NBA broadcasting career, I have the opportunity to say the Suns are going to the NBA Finals. The Suns have an opportunity to be the kings of all of pro basketball.